Good morning and welcome to another beginning drawing lesson. Last week we did some calligraphy in a fairly simple manner with a little embellishment, and this week we're going to take it to another level. It's still basically pretty simple, each element, but you can see how nice you can take something out. Something as simple, we're going to be using the lowercase letter H. And so I've already done the light drawing because, as we know, you can't really see it on the video. So I'm going to begin with the letter itself. And of course, it has thickness because we're going to be doing some different things to it. So I'm just going to start with the letter itself with a black ink pen, which is really, and if you'll remember in the very first drawing lesson, we talked about straight lines, and here's a perfect example as we come down this left side, how you flow all the way down, and that way you can get a reasonable line. So coming around, it's really beautiful, a lot of the calligraphy, and there's so many different ways that you can take it. So I'm going to come back up here, and this drawing is so light that even I, having done it, can make it a little challenging to make sure I do exactly what I want to do. So back in the days, long before the printing press, of course, all written material was done by hand. And so the embellishment that they did on a lot of the manuscripts was really very beautiful and very impressive, and you can just take it so many different places. So there are so many lines here right at the moment that I want to make sure that, even as I say, having done it myself, of course I'm a senior just like one or two of you out there. Okay, so basically that is the letter itself. And then from here, now the paper that I'm using is probably a 90-pound pressed paper. And one of the reasons that I'm using a heavier paper is you start off with pencil, and then your ink, and then when you have to erase, because there's going to be a lot of erasing, it's very easy to fold the paper here and there as you're trying to make sure that you get all the pencil marks out of there. And so it's just better in that regard, but also just when you're dealing with a better quality paper, a heavier paper like that, it's just easier to work with too. You get that 60-pound press paper, which is wonderful for practicing, so that you're not spending a lot of money on paper that you're just working, but when you're doing something very nice, the better paper pays off, not only in the working of what you're doing, but also in the end result. So now we're going to be working on the embellishment part of it, and of course, just like anything that we've talked about before, you're in control, or not, depending on where you're at, but the bottom line is you're in control in what you want to do. And so you choose, and there are so many books that you can get that will give you examples of various motifs that you can use. But this particular one, I really liked it. And this is something that is relatively new to me. I haven't really spent a lot of time dealing with calligraphy in this way, but the more that I get into it, the more interesting I find it. And so that's one of the reasons that we're doing it here now, is because for me it's like a new discovery. And that's one of the beautiful things about art, is it's never ending. And if your mind is open to it, anything is possible. And so before I come down too far this way, I want to go over to the other side. Now this ink, fortunately, being a good quality ink, dries very quickly, and so, but you have to be careful, because you don't want to be smudging any. And so that's why I'm going to be going on the outside here first, even though I haven't had a lot of trouble with the ink not drying quickly enough. And some of your more inexpensive inks you have to be a little more careful with. And so hopefully we'll be having an actual class together where we can talk about things, and I can hopefully answer some questions. I certainly don't know everything, but I know enough to help most people out, I think. Now once we get everything inked in, so you can see what we're doing, then what I'll also be doing when we get into the color, I want to just talk about color a little bit, so that colors, and we've talked about this before, the colors that we use will complement each other. But I am pleasantly surprised to hear that there were, only space for, half a dozen people in the class, which is fine, because we do have a limited space here at the Senior Center. But I was pleasantly surprised to hear that there are more than a handful of people who've been watching the videos, so thank you very much. So I'm hoping that people get something out of it, so that's wonderful. And here again, that's why it's so important to me that when I'm dealing with each person individually, because everybody is in a different place, skill-wise, but also you're all in a different place in terms of what you're interested in. And so for me to be able to help you to do the kind of work that you want to do, the kind of work that you're interested in, that is really important to me. And so I really look forward to actually having a class so that each one of you can benefit in the way that you need to benefit. So anyway, we're right down to the last part of the inking process. So, here's an element that I forgot about. It goes part of the letter, but it was so light it was hard to see, but in the end we get it. Okay, so that and that. Okay, so for just a minute, I want to do, I'm going to erase that here momentarily. I'm just going to let it dry for a minute. But I want to do a little example of the color wheel, just so that you can understand. You probably already know, but it's just a reminder, and for those people who don't know. So your primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. And when you mix two colors together, for example, red and yellow, you get orange. And when you look across to the primary color, the opposite of that mixed color, you have a complement, and so those colors go well together, blue and orange. So if you go yellow and blue, you get green. And what is opposite of green is red. It's like Christmas colors, like Christmas tree is green and you have red lights on it, everything goes together. And then finally, your red and blue make purple, or lavender, or any of that family. And if you go across to the primary color that is opposite of that, it's yellow. So purple and yellow are complementary colors. So when you get ready to decide what colors you want to use, the bottom line is try to use colors that complement each other, and that way you'll see the difference in just the way, and people who don't even know will look at it and just, they don't understand why it goes together so well, but it does because you're using complementary colors. Now, one of the colors I'm going to use in this is a brown, just because, well, first of all, I like brown, okay? But brown is one of those colors that's made with all the other colors. And so it goes with a lot, but at the same time, it's a warm color. And some of the colors I'm going to be using, for example, a yellow and an orange. And so you have the warmth of those kind of complement each other very well too. And blue and brown go together really well too. So let me see if I've got thought I had the color that I wanted. Now I'm not so sure. Now I'm sure. Okay, let me pull this back to where I think. Now, once again, as you start using your color, if you will take a scratch sheet and bevel yourself an edge, you will find that when you're using large areas, like right now we're taking care of the actual letter H itself, and in order to get a balanced look of a good flow, where you don't have lines of dark and light where you don't want it, then that beveled edge allows you the ability to make a nice smooth area of color. So and again, I'm using certain colors for this particular one, but if I was doing it again, the very same one, I could very easily change to very different colors, and the look would be so different. Now, the other thing is, there will be times when you have a smaller area to color, like when we did the cards last time. Those small leaves that I did with the green. Well, even with a beveled edge, you've got an edge that you can turn it for those sharp areas. So, or you take your pencil sharpener and you sharpen a point. Sometimes you'll need to do that just to get the kind of small area colored the way that you want. Now, you know, there are many ways to do this. You can do this with watercolors, or you could use watercolor pencils. I happen to really like colored pencil and pen and ink as a combination together. And so that's one of the reasons we're doing that. And the other thing too, depending on where you are, if you're out in nature and you're doing some drawing or whatever, you know, it doesn't take water, or, you know, you don't have to make a mess of any kind. It's clean pen and ink and colored pencil are just very easy to work with, and it doesn't take a lot of extra materials, like if you were using watercolor, for example. So we just about have our basic color here on the letter itself. And once I do one more color on the inside here, then, and I'm going to use a powder blue on that, because that's two colors that look very nice together. Okay, so that's that, and then in here, let me get myself a beveled edge here, and then we'll just come in here and now the lighter that you keep it, the more of the background of the paper is going to show through. And so now I don't want to take a lot of time. I would make the brown darker because it would go better together, but I want to make sure that I've got enough time to do this whole project before we run out of time. So I would make all of these browns darker, and if we have time I'll do that just to show you, but you get the idea of how it's going to look. Okay, so that takes care of that. Then we're going to go to the yellow. And again, the darker, the more material of the yellow too that you put down makes it richer. But we are dealing in part with a time limit, and I want to make sure that we can get this at least done to the point where you can see how this particular embellishment on this one letter, how interesting it can be, and how you can take all different kinds of elements to embellish your calligraphy. Now here's an example of an area that didn't get erased. There's a little pencil mark there, but that's in terms of understanding what we're doing. That's not a big deal. But those are the kind of things that you can look out for. I'm going to go to the orange over here so that, now of course, since orange was made from yellow and red, of course, orange is going to go with either red or yellow very nicely because they're in the same family. So that's another way of looking at it. It's the family of colors. And some families get along, and some not so much, as I'm sure that at least one of you out there understands what I'm talking about. Hopefully you all have families that you get along with and that support each other, because that's a wonderful thing. And I'm happy to say I have a family that is very supportive, so makes a big difference in your life. So finally, then, it looks like this is the last area for me to apply color to. Now the nice thing about embellishing calligraphy is you've got all the different letters that you can deal with. And so, I mean, you could spend hours playing around with the different embellishments on the different letters. In fact, like I was saying, this is a new area for me to get involved in, but I've been thinking about doing a notebook with doing the entire alphabet and just seeing all the different ways that, the only trouble is you can take, for example, just the letter A, and you could do it 50 different ways. And so, where do you start and where do you stop, you know? But the key is there's just so much that can be done. There's so much material to work with in just this one area of manuscripts, calligraphy. Just very cool. So I just saw an area here. I'm going to add a little bit of line there. Give it a chance to dry. So I hope that everybody out there is, in this very challenging time that we're living in, are all safe and healthy and able to make the most of the time that you have. So basically that's that, and depending on how much time we have left, I want to darken this brown to show you how different by just adding a little more color to it. I wanted to do the whole thing to make sure that we had enough time for you to see, but you see the difference between the color here and the color here. It's the same pencil, but depending on how light or dark that you want it. But by making it darker, not only is the color richer, but also you don't pick up the background. And if you're dealing with a white background, they show up quite heavily. So I don't know. So anyway, since we hopefully have a little more time, I'm darkening this up so that you can see. And it depends too, and for example, if you were making a card using this kind of calligraphy, this kind of embellishment, depending on who you're making the card for, would be a determining factor in terms of whether you want it light or dark. So for example, on those on the banner that we wrote a thank you card, we wrote the thank you on there. Depending on how dark the color is, could cover up the words that you've written there. So that's one of the determining factors too of how dark or light you want something to be. And so, but you can see how much richer this is already. And it's like anything in the art world, it takes time. If you care about what you're doing, it takes however long it takes. And so patience, either if that's something that you have or wish to develop, this is a good way to allow yourself, however much time it takes, to take it to the level that you want it. And right now, it's one of the things we have lots of. But fortunately, things are opening up slowly, but as long as people maintain your physical distancing and wearing a mask when you're around other people, it's really important not to go backwards after we've spent, 3 months trying to put this behind us. And so, and then we, as the older generation, are supposedly, or have been, at least in the beginning, more of the vulnerable population, but unfortunately, young people are catching it now. But hopefully, they're strong enough to where they'll be able to heal after the process. But anyway, there's an example of an embellished calligraphy. So thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you soon.